Welcome back, and another video whilst we travel around Ireland. So we are now in County Clare. Park up last night was at a place called O'Brien's Bridge, which is in the area of Montpellier. It was very peaceful and it absolutely lashed last night, to use a colloquial term. O'Brien's Bridge is an island village, and there are 3 well-defined walking loops. Today we're going to follow the shortest of them and we'll take you along with us. The village of O'Brien's Bridge takes its name from the first bridge built here in 1506. The bridge connects the village of O'Brien's Bridge to its sister village Montpellier on the other side of the river. It was originally built on an ancient ford, which was one of the very few Shannon crossings. It's steeped in waterways history, and during the 1830s was a very busy port on the waterborne trade route from the west coast of Ireland to Dublin and on to the port of Liverpool. The flow here on the Shannon was really strong, and so they used this capstan attached to the barge and out to a buoy in the river to haul the boats through the bridge crossing. Today it's got a more practical use, not the capstan, but you can see there's a platform down into the river, and so when you've had your sauna you can go for your cold dip. The navigation ceased in 1920, and as you can see, quayside is now quite silted up and full of weeds. An amazingly wide river. It must have been incredibly impressive when this was in full navigation, and they don't talk about it. This was the Panama Canal of its day, joining the Atlantic through to Dublin port, allowing the transfer of goods from one side of Ireland to the other, essentially straight through the middle.
In October 1786, a gentleman, no name, complained that the section from Limerick to Killahoe had at that point taken 31 years to complete. You think it takes a long time for infrastructure projects these days? He also said that one of the reasons it had taken so long was because there was so much self-interest and corruption.
But the capital infrastructure projects on the Shannon River hadn't ended. In the 1920s, as part of the Shannon hydroelectric scheme, most of the fall of the River Shannon is concentrated between the short distance of Lough Derg and Limerick, and this is the fall that powers the turbines at Ardnacrusha Power Station. 400 metres of water per second sent down the headrace channel to their power station, and it also controls the levels of the water in the river. Well, it's coming through there at a fair lick, isn't it? So as we follow the loop walk around, it brings us back into the village of O'Brien's Bridge. What a lovely walk. Back around in a circle to the bridge and Claude. We are at Autumna Marina Car Park. €10 a night. Fresh water, bins, grey waste. If you go to the Super Value and buy a Waterways card, which you have to load with €10, you also get showers. And they're €2 each. You can stay here for up to 48 hours, but then there's no return within 5 days. It was super quiet. And the thing that really shocked us is we got a knock on the door of the van. Have you got any rubbish? And they came and took our rubbish away. Autumna's got it all going on. So there's a castle, there's a forest park, an abbey, workhouse and famine museum, and amazing walks around Lough Derg and along the River Shannon. And it's a beautiful day, apart from the clouds which keep on threatening wet stuff. This is a Dominican friary. It was formerly a house of Cistercian monks. It's in remarkably good condition.
The workhouse at Autumna is a remarkably well-preserved example, and the guided tour was excellent. Penultimate was one of the later workhouses created to relieve the massive overcrowding during the Great Famine. Workhouses in Ireland were originally established in 1838 and were designed to be harsh, with inmates, as they were called, fed poor and sometimes rotting food and expected to work at hard labour like stone breaking or picking oakum. Workhouses were paid for by rates imposed on landlords, who often made up the Board of Guardians responsible for allocating funds. Corruption was commonplace, and Penultimate was a good example of this, with the master escaping to America with £500 of stolen funds.
Quite possibly one of the most picturesque service points that we've had on the trip to date. What a beautiful morning here in Loch Derg. It's time to go and do some washing before we head towards Galway town.
Athenry, probably most famous for the folk song from the 1970s, The Fields of Athenry. However, it is a medieval town. It has a Dominican priory, a Norman castle which was built on the ford which gives the town its name. Athenry means the ford of the king. About 70% of the city walls remain, including this gate, which is about 2.5 metres high. We had to drive round it. The town also still has its medieval layout, which was quite challenging in a camper van. These very narrow streets. I do have to tell you though, the only reason we've ended up here was because we tried to find somewhere to park in Galway City. If you have a van of your own, I do not recommend you try and park in the places listed on Park for Night or Search for Sites in Galway. One has a height barrier, the other has a sign saying buses only. We wasted about 2 hours trying to find somewhere to park, which was incredibly annoying and frustrating. And that is how we have ended up in a car park in Athenry. It's free, it'll do, and we can get the train into Galway tomorrow.
Oh no, they're doing it again. This time, a train into Galway. I was sitting at a railway station, got a ticket for my destination. Ooh. Oh my goodness, it was so wet in Galway. Now, our camera, Aussie, does not like to get wet. We had to take the fallback position, and here's a few stills of Galway. It was an interesting place. Such a shame we couldn't stay there, because there were some really good places we could have eaten or had a drink. But the museum was absolutely superb. Probably the best so far. Definitely worth a visit. And it was free. Good morning. Well, we've moved on a little bit from our explorations in Galway, and we are at a forestry site, and it's the start of a mountain bike course. It was empty, completely empty, and so peaceful. Yesterday it was so drizzly all day. Overnight it was ridiculously windy, but we had the place to ourselves, And today we're heading towards Oughterard and we've got a mining experience. So we'll see you there. We are here at the Glen Gowler Mines, a family farm experience. We're going to go and find out a bit more about this area and what lies beneath it. So the mine visit took us about 40 metres down into the main shaft of the mine. The mine then goes on for another 20 or so metres further underground until it meets a natural lake, and they don't know how deep or where that goes. The mine operated for around about 20 years and was mining gallium. There were other minerals also present in the mine. So you've got iron pyrite, you've got calcites, and other sort of crystalline materials. The gallium was taken by horse and cart to the village of Oughterard, where it was then taken to Galway by boat, and from Galway on to Swansea, where it was broken down into its constituent parts were predominantly lead and silver. The lead was made for making bullets for the American Civil War. And when the American Civil War finished, they stopped mining here. And that was around about 1865. The life of a miner was very hard. They were working in the dark, burning tallow candles. And one of the issues with tallow candles is that they're a very dirty burn and they don't do your lungs any good at all. The mineral gallium containing so much lead, I think they were saying that it contained somewhere in the region of 40% lead. And lead isn't good for you, so you shouldn't ingest it. They were also blowing holes in the dark. So in this particular mine, there were 120 miners working at any one time. They worked in gangs of 3. They had to drive holes into the rock using cold chisels and hammers. Then they used gunpowder, mixture of gunpowder and straw. 2 men came back up to the surface and 1 man stayed below, lit the fuses, and then retired to a safe place. Had to cover his ears because the blast was so loud. So imagine 120 people working in teams of 3, each of them blasting holes in quite a confined space. Must have been horrendous. They bid for the areas that they were mining for. So the lowest bid got an area. There was no guarantee they were going to find any gallium in that area. And they mined that area for up to 4 weeks. When the mine was closed, it was closed and filled in at the end of a shift. Miners went home, came back the next morning. The mine had been filled. And that was that. The end. In the year 1225, King Henry III commanded his Lord Justice in Ireland to seize the whole country of Connaught. In the battles that followed, the O'Flahertys were defeated and their fort at Bunnageem overrun. They were expelled to the lands of Connaught, never again to rule or be welcomed in their ancestral territory to the east of Loch Corrib.
This is the remains of the banqueting hall. It was a very comfortable room, but not as fortified as the rest of the castle. The reason the building collapsed is because it was over the river, and the arch over the river collapsed. It's said that unwelcome guests were dispatched through a trapdoor in the floor of the banqueting hall into the river below. I don't think that's a bad idea. I can definitely think of circumstances where that might have come in handy.
I've learnt not to question your thoughts. We've come to visit Bridget's garden, which is a multiple award-winning garden that takes you through a variety of the Celtic representations. So first of all, we have the winter garden, celebrating Semaine. time for reflection and rebirth, awaiting the movement of spring. And then the next season is in bulk, spring. So our next garden takes us into summer, or Biltana. Time for all sorts of awakenings. And then we transition from summer through to autumn and early August, and the festival of Lunasa, the beginning of harvest and the transition towards the winter. So on our travels we've taken you to gnome forests, we've taken you to hobbit houses. Well, it would only be appropriate here in Ireland to take you to the land of the fairy folk. Shh, you'll frighten them. Can you imagine a more perfect place to spend the night, especially when the wind isn't rushing and the sun has actually come out? It was a little misty last night, so we couldn't see the mountains. But isn't this just beautiful? And it was so quiet. So quiet. So we're on the side of the road, park up, on a bog road, heading towards Clifton in Connemara. So where we stayed last night was the viewpoint on Bog Road. Bog Road runs through the centre of Blanket Bog, one of the most magnificent wetland environments in Europe, dating back over 6,000 years. And we've come along to a site here on the Wild Atlantic Way, Derry Gimlau. And Derry Gimlau was where, in 1907, Marconi made the first successful commercial wireless transmission of Morse code across the Atlantic. In 1919, John Alcock and Arthur Whitten Brown also landed or made land here on a transatlantic flight from Newfoundland. This was the first European site to connect directly with North America by aeroplane. Here on the bog we can see where some peat has been cut. So the tradition is that they cut peat for fuel.
Once the peat is cut, it is turned once a week for 4 weeks. Then it is stacked into a pyramid and left to dry for a bit longer. Gradually, all the pyramids that are joined together until they make one big pyramid. This is all dried, so ready for collection. Oh, don't throw it at me. Oh! Oh, it's surprisingly light. Really light. There's no water left in that at all. It's very dry. Apparently, it burns like a log about the same amount of time, but creates a lot more ash. And we're doing a 5k loop walk. Lots of information boards about the bog and about the previous uses for this area. This blanket bog is absolutely beautiful. Can you see the bog cotton? It's so pretty. It's such an important habitat for so many species, but there are still 3 Irish power stations using peat to create power, and they use so much of it, so much faster than it can ever grow back.
The site that Marconi built was absolutely immense. Huge power station. There was even a railway line that delivered coal and peat to the power station. And of course the peat was harvested locally here. There was an immense condenser hall. I didn't know that you needed so much energy to create radio waves, but of course they were sending and receiving. The site itself only operated for about 20 years, but that was the start of radio communication. So this is a bit of an unusual shot, isn't it? We are at Clifton Eco Camping site just outside Clifton in Connemara, and today has been absolutely beautiful, 20 plus degrees, so much so that we've gone to the beach. The campsite has a private beach, the sand is gloriously white, you could almost imagine that you weren't in Ireland, until of course you touch the water. So we've taken the N59 out of Clifton, following signs for Westport. Rather than following the Wild Atlantic Way, which weaves you around the edge of the coast, we've come through the mountains. And just in front of us here is Kylemore Abbey. It's an extraordinary looking building. The countryside is absolutely stunning. Tall green mountains. And it's quite a windy old road. This is the Killarry Fjord, isn't it stunning? Just down on the left there are oyster beds. This is a sea loch. So when they call it a fjord, it truly is. 20,000 years ago, you could walk from here to Norway on glacial ice. I mean, you couldn't, but you could. It's one of 3 fjords. It's the largest of the fjords in Ireland. The river that feeds into Killarry Harbour, which is just over there, is a ecologically respected blue dot river and has freshwater mussels, pearl mussels. They can live up to 140 years, a pearl mussel. So if you remember when we were at the castle of Auchnanur, or should we say Darrelle's inheritance, we mentioned Grace O'Malley, who was the famous pirate queen. Now, Grace O'Malley was married to Donald O'Flaherty. It was a marriage of convenience in many ways. They were quite vicious clans in their own rights, the O'Malleys and the O'Flahertys, and this is the border of their lands. And this fjord made a great place for both smuggling and pirate activities. We are continuing our drive through County Mayo, and we've come across another wedge tomb. It's a much better example of a wedge tomb than the one at Loch Gur. You can see the overall shape and the way that it tapers down to the end. This was also used during penal times. There were restrictions on where and how you could worship as an altar for religious practices. So if ancient archaeology is your thing, this is the Clew Bay archaeological trail. Just here at the edge of the lake, the black stumps are part of an ancient forest 4,500 years ago. They were exposed when the peat was cut at the edge of the bog here. Tonight we are in the town of Westport in County Mayo, and our park up is on a car park by the leisure centre. It's €3 for 24 hours parking. Well, there we are. That's a load off the old head. Shouldn't need to brush it now for a while. So Westport it's a pretty little town. It's relatively new as towns go, so it's not one of our very ancient places. Comes about from a family called the Browns. The Browns were from Sussex, and they came to Westport in the 16th century. One of the reasons we're here, apart from it being on our route, is that we continue on the path of the Pirate Queen, and it was her great-great-great-granddaughter who married into the Brown family. And we're going to go to Westport House tomorrow, and that's the house that the Browns built to cement their place in the upper echelons of County Mayo society. The visit to Westport House was interesting, but a fairly atypical version of an aristocratic family, rags to riches, and then heading back to rags again, as the building was sold in 2019 to some local people who have vowed to keep it open for the community. But it was interesting to find out a little bit more about Grace O'Malley and her family. So our resting place for tonight is Burishool Friary, a Dominican priory built around about 1470. And this one, they hadn't got permission from the Pope, but it's all right. He forgave them in 1486. Carry on, boys. Go give your prayers. And here we are, parked on this estuary inlet. Apart from the howling wind, it's quite a peaceful place. Well, there we are. Another video. We are really enjoying our trip to Ireland and hope that you are too. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, well, you know the drill. Subscribe, click like, leave us a comment. We love to see comments, and hope you enjoyed this last video. That post-industrial walk along the Shannon Canal I thought was fascinating. And then, of course, doing a little bit of family history digging for Darrelle. But there will be another one along soon. So keep watching. See you later.